So yeah, Akira Kurosawa was born in 1910 from a family of samurai. Actually, he made a lot of movies about samurais, so he knew what he was talking about from cultural point of view. A family from Tokyo. We can see I made some editing to support the talk. The first one is I've chosen is when he received in 1980. So he was 1990. So he was 80 years old. He received an Oscar for all his career. Let's see that. Okay, just a pause here. Those two people, like maybe you know them, they were introduced just before in the ceremony. Mr. Steven Spielberg and Mr. George Lucas. And the speaker just introduced, like at this time, both of them, they had, out of the 10 biggest productions ever and the biggest successful movies, out of the 10 in the history, they made 8 of them. So basically, it's such a homage, recognition. That he received, and they look, the commentators, they look really as kids compared to this, and they really venerated him, actually.
このような大変立派な賞をいただいて誠に光栄に思います。
I am very deeply honored to receive such a wonderful prize.
しかし果たして私がそれに値するかどうか少し心配です。
But I have to ask whether I really deserve it, and I'm a little worried.
なぜなら私はまだ映画がよく分かっていない。
Because I don't feel that I understand cinema yet.
いや、その映画というものをまだしっかり掴んでいないような気がするからです。
I really don't feel that I have yet grasped the essence of cinema.
映画というものは素晴らしい。しかし、この素晴らしく美しいものをつかむのは大変難しい。
Cinema is a marvelous thing, but to grasp its true essence is very, very difficult.
しかし、私はこれからもこの映画という素晴らしいものをつかむために全力を尽くすつもりです。それがこの賞に応える一番いい方法だと思うからです。
But what I promise you is that from now on, I will work as hard as I can at making movies, and maybe by following this path, I will achieve an understanding of the true essence of cinema and earn this award.
ジョージ、スティーブン、Thank you.
George and Steven. His last movie, like a few years after this, is called Madadayo. It means in Japanese "not yet," and not yet. I'll have actually it's another one. I'm not dead yet, and so he made another one, and finally he died in 2000. Why is he such a great director? For many reasons. One reason is a guy will explain for a few minutes much better. I think he's done a marvelous job.
Hi, my name is Tony, and this is Every Frame a Painting. So here's a fundamental question. When you're judging a shot, what's the first thing you look for? Is it balance? Leading lines? Golden ratio? Color? Light? Shapes? I think these are all essential, and they're all part of good images. But there's one thing I always notice first. Movement.
For me, Kurosawa is the Beethoven of movie directors. It's that recognizable full sound that Beethoven had that is so unmistakable.
A Kurosawa film moves like no one else's. Each one is a masterclass in different types of motion, and also ways to combine them. Over a career spanning half a century, he made 30 films, and in all of them, the movement is surprising and cinematic. Wow. If you'd like to see the names of the films, press the CC button below. So, what types of movement did he like? First, there's the movement of nature. In every one of his films, the background of the shot features some kind of weather. Wind, water, fire, smoke, snow. One advantage of this approach is that shots have a lot of visual interest. Even when people are still, there's that rain in the background to draw your eye.
Rain is a real emotional trigger that works in any film. So anything that's excessive, because it gives you another layer that the audience can relate to sensually.
Second, there's the movement of groups. Kurosawa films usually feature large groups of people who either band together or split apart. Crowds like this are really cinematic. When you put this many people in a shot, any emotion feels big. If you want a good reaction shot, try using 4 people. Or 25. And if you want something really big, which brings us to number 3, the movement of individuals. One of my favorite things about Kurosawa is that his blocking is unrealistic and exaggerated. If someone is nervous, they pace left and right. If they're outraged, they stand straight up. And if they're ashamed, he would often tell his actors to pick one gesture for their character and repeat it throughout the film. That way, the audience can quickly see who's who and how they're feeling. Number 4, movement of the camera. One of the hallmarks of Kurosawa's style are his fluid camera moves that go from a close-up to a full shot to an over-the-shoulder in a single unbroken take. I did another essay about these shots called the Spielberg Oneer, but what's important here is that every camera move has a clear beginning, middle, and end. Just by itself, this move tells a story. And last, there's movement of the cut. Kurosawa is one of the few directors who worked as his own editor. One of the reasons his movies just flow is that he tends to cut on movement. Often, you're paying so much attention to someone who's moving that you don't see the edit. When he finishes a scene, he switches the rhythm, usually by ending on something static and then cutting straight into movement. By switching up the rhythm, he keeps you on your toes, because you can't guess the next cut. So with all that, let's break down one scene and study the motion. This scene comes from Seven Samurai. I'm not going to tell you what it's about. See how long it takes you to figure it out. Ready? The first shot shows the whole village, then just the important characters, then just the samurai. Right about here, most people get what's happening. As Kikuchiyo sits down, his action ripples outwards to affect the whole village. Notice how much the wind adds to the scene. Even when people are still, there's that little bit of wind to spice up the frame. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, let's jump 60 years into the future. This is the Avengers. Here, we start with a camera move into an establishing shot. But this time,
these were in Phil Coulson's jacket.
We get dialogue right away. Throughout this scene, the only things that move are the camera and Nick Fury. Even though we have weather outside and actors in the background, none of them are used. Notice that the camera movement doesn't have a beginning or an end. and there's no variation. Each shot goes in the exact same direction.
Maybe I had that coming.
But in Seven Samurai, the camera moves have a distinct beginning, middle, and end, and each shot changes the direction from the previous one. As he climbs up, Kurosawa uses the movement of the flag to cut smoothly into this angle, all Seven Samurai and their banner together. This scene has every type of movement, carefully pieced together and spaced throughout. The weather, the group, the individual, the camera, the cut. But this scene tells its story mostly through dialogue.
Called the Avengers Initiative.
Sure, the camera moves, but it's pointless movement. For all the money that was put into it, this scene feels flat.
It's an old-fashioned notion.
But how could you improve a scene like this? Well, if you know what the scene's about, try to express it through movement. Start with the character. How are they feeling? Is there any way the actor can convey that by moving? Okay, maybe too much. Let's be more subtle. Take the feeling that's inside the character and bring it out through the background. If a character is angry and menacing, you can do this. Or if she's simmering with resentment. Another option is to contrast one person against the group. So if somebody suffers a very public humiliation, this works. Or if they're looking for a needle in a haystack. You can use camera movement to convey excitement. You can cut on movement to show surprise. And you can combine every type of motion into one amazing image. By the way, you don't need to put every type of movement in every shot. That's just tiring. But there's a nice middle ground with lots of variation and subtlety. And you won't know what works best until you try it. If you combine the right motion and the right emotion, you get something cinematic.
Yeah. In case you wonder, like the two people who are interviewed there, the first one is Sidney Lumet, and the second one was Robert Altman. So two major directors of Hollywood in the 60s, 70s, 80s. They got really inspired. He mentioned so that, again, Mr. Kurosawa, the picture, so filming and editing, so when he was much younger, probably the period of the Seven Samurai or Rashomon. Rashomon is 1950, Seven Samurai is 54, 55. About Rashomon. It's. I think we have some time. So if you want it to be a bit interactive, like the idea is really to have a presentation. I have a few more things to say, of course, about the movie after, and we'll watch the movie. It's 1.5 hours, so it's not that long, and we can have, if you want, like participation, like a talk. But if feel free to ask questions. Like probably I won't be able to answer, but that's. No problem asking. Rashomon, the story of Rashomon is based on a book called In the Groove by a Japanese author from 1923, I think. I don't speak Japanese and I don't have glasses. Ryu Nokoshi Akutagawa. Okay, you can have a look at his complete filmography there. Okay, Rashomon being there. Rashomon was really a huge critical success, unexpected somehow, and it became a huge commercial success also. So it really set up the Japanese, it was the first Japanese movie to be really recognized internationally. And that sets also Kurosawa as a major world director. This is Mr. Akutagawa here. the writer. Just, This is just a trailer from just an adaptation. I found like, okay, just 2 minutes. I think it's kind of fun to see a Hollywood movie, really adaptation, like a remake of Rashomon from '64. We can just spend 2 minutes.
This woman, before the very eyes of her husband.
Juan Carrasco, killer, robber, lecher.
A daringly different starring role zooms Paul Newman to his peak of dramatic power in The Outrage.
You want to know what happened? I tell you, this little breeze. When I see this woman's face, just one look, I know this is woman I must take. I take lots of women. Some they fight, some they don't fight. But this one, I know she want me.
Oh, that's Carrasco, all right.
But how they love it, especially the ladies.
The high-born ones, the table manners, the smelling salts. You see a fellow with sweat all over him, and their boilers go steaming over.
Only stars such as these can do justice to the jolting impact of questions with which the screen has never before been faced.
You can tell, but once upon a time he was raped by a wrong Carrasco. Maybe the only thing in your life that you will remember.
What was the truth? The preacher has his idea.
I can understand the violence of a storm, but the violence of men, their cruelty and savageness to one another.
You were running away, preacher. Well, keep on running, keep on running, keep on, keep on, keep on.
What was the truth? The wife. Could the fear which moved her to fight back turn to fascination? The husband. Could he be forgiving?
I may have been gagged, but I wasn't blindfolded.
No, you can't mean it. Kill me! Take it and kill me if that's the way you feel! Kill me! Only don't look at me with such contempt!
And the bandit.
I can have 100 women. Why, I'm going to take big chance for you.
Could a woman pierce the armor of his wickedness?
Está bien, señor. One live, one die.
Well, clearly there are some elements. There are some elements from the original movie, but quite clearly also, like they didn't get. I think they didn't get either the real nature of the movie or the interest of the movie or nothing like that. This is a bit pathetic, I think, but that was fun. I don't know if you found it funny. When Kurosawa decided to make this movie, 1950, so he was not very well known. He made some interesting movie, but he wasn't this big director. So he got, actually it's a pretty small budget movie by one of the 4 major studios in Japan, for my Japanese. After, Kurosawa, he kind of joked, after he got, the movie was released and got such a big recognition, they said, at that time, they didn't give me any kind of budget, and now they claim all the credit for it afterwards. That's how it is, but well, it was something. The setup is interesting. It's in Japan, so you've seen the adaptation somewhere in Mexico or South, whatever, let's forget it. The real setup is way more interesting. It's the 11th century in Japan. About the title, Rashomon, in Japanese, Mon means the gate, like a bit like think about the Chinese Tiananmen, for example, like it's the same root, so Mon. And Rashomon means like the walls of the city. So it was a major building, actually, a very important building from cultural point of view in Kyoto, in the really ancient Japan. And in the 11th century, actually, it was abandoned already and set in ruins. So that's very strange how such, like the historical thing actually is set up in a period where Japan was already seen as decadent and an empire, as if all its golden age was already past, and it was actually 1,000 years ago. It just, I think it keeps things in relative, in relation with our present times also. Next.
The thing that stays the most in my mind.
There is just another interview by Robert Altman that we've seen before. I think he says quite a few interesting things. How this time specifically Rashomon has influenced him. Like it's like it's a really major milestone in the history of cinema. This movie, and he explains. For example, Altman explains a bit.
The thing that stays the most in my mind are those shots of the sun through the trees. And that movement, a constant movement. It's said that Kurosawa was the first one that ever pointed his camera at the sun. I was shooting television then, and when I saw that, I went to work the very next day and absolutely emulated one of those shots. I don't remember what the piece was even, but I remember I had someone in a swing, and I kept swinging, had the camera in the swing, and I'd swing up and see all that stuff through it. I was fascinated with that. I've done that ever since. That rain, I love that rain. Rain is a real emotional trigger that works in any film. I love weather and rain or extreme heat or wind or snow, anything that's excessive, because it gives you another blanket, so to speak. It gives you another layer that the audience can relate to sensually. I mean, to me, every element of that film was part of that film, part of the poem. The acting style of Mifune and the Japanese actors is quite different from the English-speaking European styles of acting. It served me, the woman particularly, I thought was good. The Mifune character I might have felt was a little exaggerated, but that's the music of that culture. A Japanese person will never see the film the same as a non-Japanese person will. The Japanese culture knows that history of the samurai, like we do the American Western. Every culture has their own set of what you grow up as children. So we miss a lot of that in this film because we just don't have the background. But the best thing about it was, for non-Japanese audiences, is that there was not a lot of dialogue. It was a visual film, and the titles are almost like just to keep you up with it. You know, it's the visual stimulation that hits the audience. That's the reason for film. Otherwise, we should just turn the light out and call it radio. So it's a great film. It certainly had its influence and continues to have an influence on me.
Yeah, it's a 70 years old piece of movie. Interestingly, I think I've chosen this movie because for me it is extremely intelligent. It's amazing how it's done. The message is there. To understand it, I think you have to understand that the Kurosawa is a deep humanist. Like humanist values. The movie itself was so powerful, and the structure and all the success that it has given a name to something called the Rashomon effect. And it's used in psychology, in legal terms, in tribunals, and so many things. I'll just read Wikipedia. It's short. The Rashomon effect is the situation in which an event is given contradictory interpretations or descriptions by the individuals involved, and is a storytelling and writing method in cinema meant to provide different perspectives and point of views of the same incident. The term derives from the Rashomon movie, is used to describe the phenomenon of unreliability of eyewitnesses. So the idea is basically in some way it's a police kind of police thing, you'll understand. I don't almost defloor anything in the movie, saying that there's a murder, a samurai is killed, and the big question is who killed the samurai. So we have different witnesses. Actually, we don't even get them in direct. There are 4 people involved. You'll see that directly. We get their stories through actually another layer of 3 people. And finally, so who makes this? It's Mr. Kurosawa, so it's his piece, and he's just given it to us, to each of us, so it's extremely layered. The way it's constructed, it's not at all linear construction. It's not like A to Z and find out who the murderer is. No, it gives a lot of information, and as Wikipedia says, it's really contradictory information. It's not a puzzle to assemble. It's not like you're given, okay, a bit is this information, a bit that information. You'll discover very quickly that the pieces of the puzzles, they just don't go together. And it makes it very interesting. So actually, that's what the Rashomon effect is, actually, how it's defined. It is, it's extremely difficult to reconstruct the truth based on testimonies. Actually, I'll just read another passage, because that's funny, because that's how the Rashomon effect is defined, but actually that's not even the real topic of the movie. One day before the shooting of Rashomon started, Akira Kurosawa was approached by his 3 assistant directors. They found the script baffling and wanted him to explain it. Please read it again more carefully, he told them. If you read it diligently, you should be able to understand it, because it was written with the intention of being comprehensible. But they wouldn't leave like those 3. We believe that we've read it carefully and we still don't understand it at all. Please explain it for us. And so Kurosawa explained. Human beings are unable to be honest with themselves about themselves. They cannot talk about themselves without embellishing. The script portrays such human beings, the kind who cannot survive without lies, to make them feel they are better than. Egoism is a sin the human being carries with him from birth. It is the most difficult to redeem. This film is like a strange picture scroll that is unrolled and displayed by the ego. You say that you can't understand the script at all, it's because the human heart itself is impossible to understand. If you focus on the impossibility of truly understanding human psychology and read the script one more time, I think you'll grab the point of it. So that's probably a bit obscure, and it's on purpose. another way, like remember, like I said, like Kurosawa is a humanist, so basically he talks about human, and here, like the key word is the ego. Another way of saying that is he describes actually Rashomon is about. I don't think I spoil anything. There's no spoiler in what I'm saying. It's just like to make it more engaging and easier to understand. It's a quicksand about the quicksand of the ego. What does it mean? Like, okay, like in one, the origin, like the Rashomon's effect is we call it the unreliability of eyewitnesses. And Kurosawa himself is, no, it's the quicksand of the ego. How does it work? Basically what he's saying is that we cannot speak, we cannot really tell the truth, each of us, if we keep our ego in between the reality and between our speech, and we are always there. Like it's a Rashomon that's very interesting because it's a real study about this, like a psychological thing, and that's maybe there's another thinker. Like, he will tell better than me. Let's see.
Japan will be fun. You like Rashomon?
That's not how I remember it.
Maybe you recognize the great philosopher of our time, Mr. Homer Simpson. So they are both of them, like his wife and him, they fly to Japan and he doesn't like it, and you like Rashomon, like, come on, Japan will be fun. And he replies, that's not how I remember it. So actually, like, how do you remember things and how do you tell things? That's quite smart from The Simpsons, actually. Man, Homer is so smart. Didn't you know that? I have found very, unfortunately, very few pictures from the shooting. It's very interesting, so that you can see the famous Rashomon, so the gate. It was completely reconstructed. They had to cut wood and so on and so forth. The rain, if you remember the impact of the rain and the movement and all. And that's the only picture I could find really about the shooting itself. And the team, Mr. Kurosawa is here. And you see all you remember I spoke about 4 direct contenders in the crime and the 3 persons who relay the story to us. So I think it's 7. That's it. Shall we watch the movie now? Yeah.